Yes, David was made king of Israel. So David became the king of all Israel. So he was anointed king way back when as a child, but he wasn't made into the king at the time. And he was anointed again to be the king of some of the tribes. And then most recently, what we saw last week, he was anointed king of all of them. And so what happened after he was anointed as the king? Yes, he did. He defeated the Philistines. He defeated them a couple of times. He defeated them the first time uh, going into combat, and then the second time he used a different approach, and both times when he did that, he sought the Lord. And so we talked a lot about David's patience in the last lesson, his patience over all those years of waiting for everybody, well, waiting for the Lord to prepare everybody for him to be the king. And so there was a lot of waiting, not a little bit of waiting, a lot of waiting, even waiting when Saul was still king. And so David had spent most of his life waiting for the right timing. And when it was time to go to battle, the first thing that he did was go for what was called Jebus. Jebus? Do we know? Jerusalem, right. It's Jerusalem. We know it as Jerusalem even until today. So it was Jebus for a very long time. Even in Moses' time, it was Jebus. And so it was not Jerusalem until the timing of when David went in and took the city. And a little bit of the inside story, Brother Jim told us about climbing up the shaft with all their battle gear on, which doesn't sound too good. I have challenges like climbing the ladder and doing something, which has rugs and everything. So climbing up the shaft with all of your stuff ready to make battle when you get there, obviously they were pretty tough soldiers that were working for David and for God. And so they conquered Jerusalem, and they made it the seat of government. And all along, David obeyed the Lord. David waited upon the Lord. He asked the Lord what to do. The Lord told him. And he didn't say, okay, thanks for your opinion. Oh, that's what I'm going to do. No, he followed the Lord's guidance. And he did it the Lord's way. The Lord blessed him. The Lord blessed all of Israel for it. Okay, so now, see, that's the whole page right there. I went through it so fast. Okay. So today's lesson, let's start out by reading from our Sunday school book. I gotta find my own Sunday school book. Right here it is. Okay. On page 11 in our Sunday school quarterly, there's something called seeking the context that goes somewhat in the next page also. Would somebody like to read page 11 and like half of page 12 on seeking the context? Okay. Thank you, Sister Doris. Um, there's a lot of history about the ark. So what is the importance of the ark? We talked about the ark, but we didn't really talk about why was it important. Mm-hmm. It was where God's presence was obviously with them, right? At least one of the things. And it was created back in the time of Moses. And it was created back then under the Lord's guidance. And if we want to see what was in the ark, it wasn't all that put there at the same time. But if you look at Hebrews 9 and 4, it'll tell us what was in it. Yeah, I know. I had the same thinking. Okay, so Hebrews 9 and 4, which had the golden censer in the ark of the covenant overlaid around about with gold, wherein was the golden pot that had manna, and Aaron's rod that budded, and the tables of the covenant, which we think of those as the Ten Commandments that were presented from God to Moses to present to the people. And so those were the things that were in the ark at the time. And besides the things that were in it, and there was a lot of Lord's commandments about those three things that we just talked about, there was a lot of Lord's commandments about the ark itself. So we see in the Bible how the ark was created. It was created at God's guidance and direction. And so every single thing to do with the ark was dictated by the Lord, going all the way back to Exodus. So we can go back to, well, all right, we got to do a couple other things first. Getting ahead of myself. I'm jumping around a little bit in my notes. So we're gonna come back to that. Okay. So let's go ahead, and if we could, if somebody could read 2 Samuel 6, 1 through 9. Okay, thank you, Sister Cheryl. So we only read 9 verses. There's a lot of information in those 9 verses. We went through a lot of things there. So David had become the king of Israel. David wanted to be obedient to the Lord. He followed his commandments for going into battle with the Philistines. Had 2 battles with them, was able to succeed. In fact, he even destroyed some of their idols. And rather than even taking the precious metals and things that the idols were made of, they just burned it up and left it. They did not take it with them. And so far he's done every single thing the way the Lord wanted him to do, at least from what we've read here, regarding his commandments for things. But now we're getting into the ark. So what's the whole story with the ark? So why is the ark where it is now, and what happened? We talked about that a little bit in Seeking the Context, but what was going on that the ark was where it was now? Right. Right, they did. They gave it back. In Shiloh, right? Right. So David's heart was in the right place. Things had been messed up before David showed up. I think we can all tell that a lot of things had been messed up. Tribes were not united. Saul had been focusing his attention on going after David. Saul wasn't following the Lord's commandments, and so here's David. Now he's king, and he's trying to get things back together, get things organized, get things on the right track. And so the ark, Sister Helen mentioned, the ark was not where it should have been, and the reason that Israel lost it in the first place, or the Hebrews, is because they tried to use it as almost like a good luck charm in a battle, and guess what? They got defeated because they didn't do it God's way. They used the ark for the wrong reasons and the wrong way, and the Lord took it away from them. And the Philistines thought, look what a great thing we've done. We've taken the ark. After a little bit of time, they didn't want it anymore because the Lord did not bless them. In fact, if you get into all the details of it, they put it in the same place they put one of their idols for one of their gods, and they would go in and take a look at the idol that they had created, and it was destroyed. And they said, "Okay, we got to get this. We got to get this out of here because it's not gonna help us with anything we got to do." So it wasn't a blessing to the Jews at that time, and it wasn't a blessing to the Philistines, because none of them were thinking of it correctly, and they were definitely not following God's will. So here's David, done the right things, getting everybody together. Now he wants to bring the ark back to Jerusalem, to the seat of government, because he wants to unite everybody, and this is an important thing for the Hebrews to have, for them to put things right related to the ark. And so that's the idea, and so that's what all this is about. When we look at verse 3, talks about they set the ark of God upon a new cart. If we were doing that today, we'd have a custom-made truck. That's what we do. We have a custom-made truck, and it would be looking pretty good, and we would, I don't know if it'd be a monster truck or whatever, but it'd be something that looked pretty cool, and we would all unite around that thing. And so they set the ark upon a new cart and brought it out of the house of Abinadab that was in Gibeah. So far, everything sounds good, right? And Uzzah and Ahio, the sons of Abinadab, drave the new cart, and they brought it out of the house of Abinadab and accompanying the ark. And so they're going through all the steps. They're transporting this thing. David and the house of Israel play before the Lord. Everybody's happy. And they came to the threshing floor in verse 6. And Uzzah put forth his hand to the ark of God. It says ark of God, and took hold of it, for the oxen shook it. And the anger of the Lord was kindled against Uzzah, and God smote him there for his error. And there he died by the ark of God, right there, on the spot. So we think everybody's heart was in the right place. Everybody was, let's honor God. Let's put the ark where it belongs. Let's do all those things. But obviously, they weren't doing it right. Right, which was already written. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, yeah, right, right. So how many times you heard people say in their beliefs in God, well, as long as they're sincere, everything's fine, right? Well, here's an example right here. God's own people, and it wasn't good enough, and He didn't accept it. And so there's there's yes, yes, it is. So let's take a look. Your perfect lead in, Brother Mike. Let's go take a look at Deuteronomy 17:18 through 20. Would somebody like to read that one? Deuteronomy 17:18 through 20. Okay. Thank you, Sister Doris. So so it says here in verse 18, when he sitteth upon the throne of his kingdom, that's the king, that he shall write him a copy of this law in a book out of that which is before the priests the Levites. So he's supposed to be writing it down from the records that were passed down by the Levites. And it looks like that's not what happened. What this commandment was from the Lord back in Deuteronomy had not happened. David had not done that. And then verse 19, it shall be with him, and he shall read therein in all the days of his life, that he may learn to fear the Lord his God, and keep all the words of his law and these statutes to do them. So it wasn't only just to be familiar with them, it was to make sure that he and the kingdom followed it. That was the importance here. That his heart not be lifted up above his brethren, that he not turn aside from the commandment to the right hand or to the left, to the end that he may prolong his days in this kingdom, he and his children in the midst of Israel. So there was clear. There was a commandment. And so when we go back to verse 9, this in 2 Samuel chapter 6 and verse 9, David was afraid of the Lord that day and said, how shall the ark of the Lord come to me? So God sent him a message. Uzzah died right on the spot, and they didn't shuffle Uzzah aside and keep going with what they were doing, like they might do today with something. Just shuffle somebody aside, keep following the same process. David said, hey, whoa, what are we supposed to be doing here? This was, as soon as he realized there was a problem, this is when he said, "How shall the ark of the Lord come to me?" So he asked the question. So do we think the Levites and the priests knew the answer? Do we think they had studied all this and knew it and didn't tell David what the answer was? They should have known it. So if they studied it and they knew it, maybe they were not feeling comfortable to share with David for some reason. Don't know. Don't know about that. But they should have known it. So, right. That absolutely. That's a great point. And so here's David. How shall the ark of the Lord come to me? And in that moment, he realizes, I've got to do something different. I've got to go understand, seek the Lord, see what needs to happen, and that's what I need to do. That was what was going on with him right then at that time. If we go back and take a look, there's a few more things about the way it's supposed to be done. The ark was to be carried by the sons of Kohath, which was not the way that it was done that we just read about. So if we can go back and look at Exodus 25, 14, and 15. That's when we had the ark way back then. 25, 14, and 15. It says, "And thou shalt put the staves into the rings by the sides of the ark, that the ark may be borne with them. The staves shall be in the rings of the ark, they shall not be taken from it." Okay, and there's more things about it that they're going to carry it. They're not going to put it on a cart or transport it in a vehicle. They're going to carry it. And in Numbers 3, 30 and 31, 30 and 31, "And the chief of the house of the father of the families of the Kohathites shall be Elizaphan the son of Uzziel, and their charge shall be the ark, and the table, and the candlestick, and the altars, and the vessels of the sanctuary, wherewith they minister, and the hanging, and all the service thereof." That's pretty obvious who's responsible. It's all written right down. So there shouldn't have been any confusion that they were the ones that were responsible. Also, if we look at Numbers 4 and 15, "And when Aaron and his sons had made an end of the covering the sanctuary and all the vessels of the sanctuary, as the camp is to set forward, after that the sons of Kohath shall come to bear it, but they shall not touch any holy thing lest they die. These things are the burden of the sons of Kohath in the tabernacle of the congregation." So this was their job. The sons of Kohath, this was their job. And I got to believe the sons of Kohath were standing around watching all this happen and saying, that's what we're supposed to be doing. That's our job. And that's not what we're following. And it was made pretty obvious to David that that's the way it's got to be done. And so David, we'll see in just a moment, handled it the right way, sought the Lord, and they did transport it and handle it correctly. Also, Numbers 7 and 9. Numbers 7 and 9. "But unto the sons of Kohath he gave none, because the service of the sanctuary belonging unto them was that they should bear upon their shoulders." So in the prior verses it talks about Moses giving wagons and oxen and all kinds of other things to some of the other priests. But to the sons of Kohath he didn't, because they were carrying the ark. They weren't putting it on a horse. They weren't putting it on a cart or anything else. They were carrying it. And they weren't touching it either. You could see that. They put the staves through the side of it, and they were not touching it. So they knew exactly what they were supposed to do. Yes. Yes, supposed to be covered. And there's lots of things about the ark, as far as how it was made, how it was supposed to be taken care of, and all those things, and it looked like they didn't pay attention to those things at all. So now we go to Right. So, so it sounds like they either did, some people didn't know, or they forgot altogether what they were supposed to do, or they could have been well-meaning and said, "Oh, this will be fine." How often does that happen? You say, "This is going to be just fine. I know what the instructions say." We're getting close to Christmas time when you got to put stuff together. How many times you follow directions when you're putting something together? You just say, "Oh, we'll figure it out." Hmm. Right. And with them not having the real possession of it, it wasn't even with Saul not even supporting it. How would they do anything with it anyway, even in their time? Hmm. Somebody did. Yeah, somebody did, right, and they didn't say anything. And so the Lord has expectations on how we do things. That's why it's written in the Bible, how we should do things. And when we follow the way the Lord wants us to, just like David when he went against the Philistines both times, the Lord blessed him because he did it the right way. Yeah, yeah. So so obviously there's a huge problem. And what's great about David, David is a human being. He made a mistake here. Uh, he's a great role model that he stopped and said, "What are we going to do?" And how many times are we doing something and we stop in the middle because we think things aren't going very well for some reason, and we say, "Am I doing this the right way?" I've done that lots of times. You go on this path, you think, "Oh, everything's going great," and then you're like, "Oh, it's not working out. So what's happening? Did we pray about it? Did we seek the Lord's will in it? Did we ask for His help? Or we just start going, start doing whatever we know how to do?" And so, when you're the king of Israel, obviously the expectations are pretty high that you're going to seek the Lord's will every single day. You're going to pray to Him. You're going to ask for His help in all the decisions that you make, and that's the example we're supposed to follow also. So we're not just out there running around figuring out things for ourselves and calling ourselves a Christian when we're not seeking the Lord's will on how we should do things. And so, when you look at uh, things that are in the Bible, uh, for example, baptism. So you look at baptism. So what's the example for baptism? Jesus set the example for baptism. Jesus did it a specific way. We just studied that in Mark. John the Baptist was there in the wilderness calling people, repent and be baptized. And Jesus came, and what happened? Right. And he wasn't a baby. He wasn't a baby when he was baptized. He was an adult when he was baptized, and he was following God's will as it was pointed out at the time that he was baptized. And so when you look at the evidence in the Bible and what God expects us to do, it's pretty clear Jesus set the example. God said, "This is my son in whom I'm well pleased." We just read that in Mark. But then how many today will say, Well, I got a different way I like better. I'm going to do something else. And so you could look at baptism. You could look at taking the Lord's Supper. You could look at lots of things. That there's examples from the Bible on how we should do it. And it's easy for people to say, well, I like to do something different. Or I think this approach is better. It's more modern, or whatever you want to say about it. But it isn't. Right. It's an easy thing to do. It's not as much trouble. It sometimes it can be a people pleaser, right? So should we worry about pleasing people or pleasing the Lord? Especially in the ordinances of the church that the Lord provided to us. Should we worry about what people think and are happy? Somebody comes and says, "Oh, I don't like the way that bread tastes when we take the Lord's Supper. We need to have a different recipe, or we need to add a little bit of leaven in there. I like cinnamon rolls better than unleavened bread. Let's change it up." So obviously, we know the Lord's not going to bless that, because that might be somebody's idea, but that's not the way God wants us to do it. Yeah, exactly. Go somewhere else. Exactly. If you want to serve the Lord, we should follow what the Lord tells us to do. So, right. God would have given them the information, and the Levites had the information. So there was even another choice, as David could have said, how are we supposed to do this? What does the law say? So we have a few choices, but seeking the Lord is exactly what he should have done. Right. Yeah, good intentions. Yeah, good intentions. And maybe what it was, as far as the taking of Jerusalem, he had all that time to think. And so he thought pretty much in detail how he was going to do that. Maybe he didn't think in detail how he was going to do this with the ark, and as far as seeking the Lord's will. So David had the law back when he was around. We're blessed. We have the whole Bible. We have the Old Testament. We have the New Testament. We have it all right here in front of us. And when we think, what does the Lord want us to do? We should pray about it. We should study our Bible. That's the first things we should do. It's not the last things we should do, or somebody gets hurt or killed or some mishap happens because we didn't do it right. Then we pray about it. Sometimes that happens, right? We do it wrong. We say, okay, let's try it again. Let's try to do it God's way, see what God wants us to do. God has grace. God forgives us so many times. And he really does want us to seek him and his will and his way. When we say we're a Christian, that's what he wants us to do. And so, see. Okay, you guys already said a lot of this stuff. Okay, back to our verses. You guys are great today. I already got through 3 pages. I already got through 3 pages and we're only 10:25. Doing great. Okay, so if we could go to 2 Samuel 6:10 through 15, if somebody would read that. Okay, so first attempt didn't go so well. So this is the second run at it. So what do we think about the second run at this? Yes. Yep. The verse 13. They bear the ark of the Lord. Yep. Right. And even more telling, even before then, um, and the ark of the Lord continued in this is verse 11. And the ark of the Lord continued in the house of Obed Edom the Gittite 3 months, and the Lord blessed Obed Edom and all his household. That was telling all by itself that what David was doing, he was on the right track. He didn't even accomplish the task yet. He just basically took a time out, and all of Israel took a time out. So we got to do this the right way. We're going to stop everything and go get our act together and do this the right way. So I forgot how many thousands, 30,000. Okay, verse 6 and 1. He had 30,000 men, it says. Anytime you see men, they're usually not by themselves. They usually got other people with them, families, whatever. And they got to the point where Uzzah got killed, and he stopped. But okay, we're done. We're done. We're not going to continue with this. We're not doing the Lord's way. We're going to stop. 30,000 people are told we're going to stop. We're not doing the Lord's way. What a great example, what a great role model for all of those people, and even for us, that even though how expensive you think it is to have 30,000 people doing something. Think about Busch Stadium. That's what, 41 to whatever thousand people. Can you imagine 30,000 people doing something, and the cost of all that, and the effort, and doing, there's other things those people will be doing. They're stopping, they're doing that. That could all be handled and taken in a wrong way pretty easily. But David managed it. David was the example. We didn't do it the Lord's way, so that's what we're going to do. And I also got to believe that for the ark where they put it, the house of Obed Edom the Gittite, it wasn't just David that noticed. I think everybody noticed that they were blessed. Right. So that told everybody that they were doing the right thing. Mm-hmm. 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 Right. And sometimes it just takes a moment of thinking about what you're doing and having a timeout, right? That's what we say with our kids, putting you in timeout. Sometimes we all need to be in timeout. We all need to take a moment and think about what we're doing and how we're doing it. Are we doing it the Lord's way? Are we doing it right? Are the indications that we're doing it right? Or is it the exact opposite, that we're doing it wrong? And so here we have indications that he's doing it right all the way up through, let's see, verse 15 that we read. So now if we can read 16 through 23, if somebody would do that. 2 Samuel 6, 16 through 23. Thank you, Brother Homer. So we started that in verse 16, and that's the first time we see in this chapter Michael or Michelle, Saul's daughter. So who is Saul's daughter? Right. This was David's wife. And this was David's wife from a while back. Yeah. Yeah, it's first one. Yeah. So let's go back in 1 Samuel 18 and 17 and take a look at that. She's back in that area. Okay, so 1 Samuel 18 and 17. And Saul said to David, Behold, my elder daughter, Merab, her will I give thee to wife, only be thou valiant for me, and fight the Lord's battles. For Saul said, Let not mine hand be upon him, but let the hand of the Philistines be upon him. He's talking about David, because he's trying to get rid of David in this case. And David said unto Saul, Who am I? And what is my life or my father's family in Israel, that I should be son-in-law to the king? So up unto this point, David had been a shepherd before then, and David was a servant of Saul. And there were already the stories about Saul conquering his thousands and David his 10,000s, right, by this time. But it came to pass at the time when Merab, Saul's daughter, should have been given to David, that she was given unto Adriel the Mahathalite to wife. So Saul changed his mind, seemingly at the last minute. It said at the time came to pass at the time when she should have been given to David, that she was given to Adriel instead. And Michal, this is verse 20, and Michal, Saul's daughter, loved David, and they told Saul, and the thing pleased him. And Saul said, I will give him her, that she may be a snare to him, and that the hand of the Philistines may be against him. Wherefore Saul said to David, Thou shalt this day be my son-in-law in one of the twain. And Saul commanded his servants, saying, Commune with David secretly, and say, Behold, the king hath delight in thee, and all his servants love thee. Now therefore be the king's son-in-law. And the Saul's servants spake those words in the ears of David. And David said, Seemeth it to you a light thing to be a king's son-in-law, seeing that I am a poor man and lightly esteemed? And the servants of Saul told him, saying, On this manner spake David. And Saul said, Thus shall ye say to David, The king desireth not any dowry, but 100 foreskins of the Philistines, to be avenged of the king's enemies. But Saul thought to make David fall by the hand of the Philistines. And so David didn't have any money, didn't have any dowry, didn't have any riches, anything like that to pay for this wedding. So Saul works it to his purposes. And in verse 26, And when his servants told David these words, it pleased David well to be the king's son-in-law, and the days were not expired. Wherefore David arose and went, he and his men, and slew of the Philistines 200 men. And David brought their foreskins and gave them into full tale to the king, that he might be the king's son-in-law. And Saul gave him Michal his daughter to wife. And Saul saw and knew that the Lord was with David, and that Michal, Saul's daughter, loved him. And Saul was yet the more afraid of David, and Saul became David's enemy continually. Then the princes of the Philistines went forth, and it came to pass, after they went forth, that David behaved himself more wisely than all the servants of Saul, so that his name was much set by. So this whole plan that Saul had with his daughter, what happened? Right. It not only did not work, it had the exact opposite effect. So he was more endeared to the people of Israel because of it. Even the Philistines had respect for him. And so, and his perception was correct when we read in verse 28, and Saul saw and knew that the Lord was with David. If the Lord is with somebody else, and you're not doing things that are helping them, what's going to happen? If you're contrary to somebody that's serving the Lord, That's not a good place to be, because Lord could judge you for that, and it's not going to go very well. So, right, right, exactly. In this case, David had already been anointed. So he saw that whole situation. She pops up again, 2 Samuel 19. Is that right? That might be the wrong one. It might be 1 Samuel 19. Take a look. I did get it wrong. What do you do when you get it wrong in your notes? That's confusing. When you write your notes down the wrong way and then you're trying to figure it out. Okay, so I said 2 Samuel. It's actually 1 Samuel. 1 Samuel 19 and 11 is where we're going to go. This is where Michelle, however we're going to say it, that's where she pops up again. Saul also sent messengers unto David's house to watch him and to slay him in the morning. And Michelle, David's wife, told him, saying, If thou save not thy life tonight, tomorrow thou shalt be slain. So Michelle let David down through a window when he went and fled and escaped. And Michelle took an image and laid it in the bed and put a pillow of goat's hair for his bolster and covered it with cloth. When Saul sent messengers to David, she said, He is sick. And Saul sent the messengers again to see David, saying, Bring him up to me in the bed, that I may slay him. And when the messengers were come in, behold, there was an image in the bed, and a pillow of goat's hair for the bolster. And Saul said unto Michelle, Why hast thou deceived me so, and sent away mine enemy, that he is escaped? And Michelle answered Saul, He said unto me, Let me go. Why should I kill thee? So here she is. She's looks like she's in love with David. She's married to David. Doesn't look like she did anything wrong so far. And here she's actually saving David's life by helping him escape. Her father Saul escaping out the window, and she's coming up with a story to buy him some time. That's why she put all the stuff in the bed, so that they would say, oh, it looks like he's sick. Okay, what do we do now? We don't know. Let's go talk to Saul. Come back again. Lots of time goes by, and David's escaped. So all of that has happened. And then now, here we are in the verses we just read a moment ago. And we see that Michelle, David's first wife, has taken a different perspective. And she says to him, verse 20, this is 2 Samuel 6 and 20, How glorious was the king of Israel today, who uncovered himself today in the eyes of the handmaids of servants, as one of the vain fellows shamelessly uncovered himself. So she's criticizing David. She's not supporting what he's doing. She's not even participating or supporting in any way this whole thing of getting the ark put back to where it belongs. In fact, she's telling him, you're not acting very kingly. You're not acting very sophisticated. You're not, I don't know, if you think of the King and Queen of England and that sort of thing, there wasn't a whole lot of pomp and circumstance to what David was doing. David was trying to do it in a way that was pleasing to the Lord, to the best of his talents and abilities. And so here in the 21st verse, David says to Michelle, It was before the Lord, which chose me before thy father, and before all his house, to appoint me ruler over the people of the Lord, over Israel. Therefore will I play before the Lord. And I will yet be more vile than thus, and will be base in mine own sight. And of the maidservants which thou hast spoken of them shall I be head in honor. And so he's telling her he's doing it the right way. He's doing it the way the Lord told him to do it. And he's doing it to the best of his abilities. And then in the verse 23, Therefore Michelle, the daughter of Saul, had no child until the day of her death. So what's the significance of that? Right. So she was David's wife. So certainly there was no other, man that she was going to be marrying at that time, right? And so, and it's also a possibility she could have an heir, right? I mean, that's possible if it had been a son. So that was a possibility also. So all of that was taken away from her. She had no future. That was the bottom line of that whole thing, is because of her approach and because of her attitude, she had no future. Yes. Right. It was handy. You didn't have to go find one. It was right there, right? Yeah. So that's another telling thing. Thanks for bringing out that point. Yeah. And in this case, David, I mean, it wasn't just about the ark itself. Jerusalem was made the center of government for the Hebrews, but now the thing that they thought of as one of their spiritual uh, aspects of being a Jew was the ark. And so he wanted to put it in the right place. Right. Well, and everything David did pointed to God. And so even when he said, stop everything, let's do this right, it was so we could do it God's way. So he set an example. And if you look at what he said about being base and all those things, he was being humble. That's what he was doing. He was being humble. He didn't want people to look at him and say, look how great I am, look at what I've done, look at all these things. He was pointing to God and God's blessings. The ark was a symbol of them even getting through from the Exodus, getting through all of that to the promised land, everything. There was a lot of things attached to the ark, not just one event or anything. It was going back to the time of Moses and showing what was happening all the way back then when the Lord was saving them. So there's lots and lots of things in here. We could have done 20 more verses easily. But our time's up. Oh, a little bit more. Thanks, everybody.